I usually do this in about 40 minutes, actually. Sorry, it's taking me longer. I've presented this paper a few times. So the second version of the nativist hypothesis is that it reduces to the view that there's a capacity, and Locke is saying that if this is the view, then it collapses into empiricism. Well, here I have lots of things to say about this, but the first point is that if the views, as Locke is saying, are indistinguishable, then why did they count as empiricists? They may very well count as nativists. So that's one thing. But I think that the other issue, and here I will just summarize the point instead of going through the arguments so that we can wrap things up. When Locke is saying that if the nativist is not committed to the presence of innate ideas, then of course he must be committed to the view that there is innate capacity. So Locke means one thing by innate capacity, and the nativist means another thing. So what Locke is prepared to admit, acknowledge as innate are just some learning mechanisms, right? The capacity of abstraction, compounding ideas together, and these are domain general. In other words, you can abstract the concept of two in the same way you can abstract the concept of dog, right? But when the nativist is talking about abilities which are innate, he or she is talking about domain specific. So a learning capacity is just so that we are predisposed to develop particular ideas. So that, for example, just to go back to Carey's, she believes, and this is the very large literature in psychology on the perception of object, right? So that she believes that we all have this innate ability to perceive an object as enduring, as one and the same, despite the fact that you never see the same object. And they're also, so they're called domain specific because the principle guiding a certain domain, like object, may be distinct from from the principles constraining your knowledge of physics, right, or geometry. And so if that's the case, Locke's argument doesn't work, right? Because he says, well, the nativist is only assuming that there's a capacity of knowing that it's the same as the empiricist, but it's not true because Locke is talking about domain general learning capacity, and the nativists are talking about a domain specific. So the views are different. But here's the interesting point, which I want to, actually, I'm interested in getting your response to. And this is something that I talked very much about with Rochelle Gellman at RUX at the Carl Zeiss Center. So this is not an obvious thing. That's why some people have different views about this. So, but suppose that Locke was willing to concede that there are in the mind some domain-specific learning mechanisms which are innate, right? Then it's true that they will say the same thing. But this view doesn't count as empiricist, does it? Right? Well, I think that here's the reason. Because a theory, a concept, development, that postulates the existence of a lot of domain-specific structural constraints on what ideas the mind will develop hardly counts as empiricist. Why? It is true that they're all saying, remember that quote from Carey, they're all saying that the representation isn't there, but there are some constraints which would allow you to go directly from, so being exposed to some evidence to the production of a certain idea. So the idea is not there, but it's kind of created fast and through a non-learning mechanism. It's not learned. But I think that this view differs from empiricism specifically for the following reason. So it is the very structure of the mind that determines and specifies what stimuli from the environment cause the development of what concepts. And although it is agreed with empiricism that encounters with the environment are crucial for the acquisition doesn't mean learned, right? Acquisition then means that you go from not having the idea to having the idea. But that doesn't mean that it's learned.
The capacity of knowing?
It could mean a capacity of knowing. It could mean that, just sometimes it happens that, you've been exposed to certain, say, it happens in mathematics all the time. So, for example, for a lot of, it takes time for kids to learn about fractions. At some point, poof, you understand it. It could just, but it doesn't mean that you learned it step by step, by induction. It just, right. So that seems to suggest that there was this ability there, and you kind of, through a ladder, you've been brought to finally bring it out, something like that. So for example, this is a quote. So that's why I'm saying, even if you talk about, even if the nativist hypothesis is less robust, you're not committed to the view of the presence of representations, but you're committed to the view that there are some constraints on how you learn knowledge about certain things, and we all get that knowledge and it remains the same through life. That doesn't count as empiricist, that counts as nativist. So for example, Rochelle Gelman talks about skeletal structures. So she's not a representational nativist, but she says, when I say that core domains benefit from the presence of innate structures, I find it helpful to use the metaphor of a skeleton. Skeletons need not be evident on the surface of a body. Most importantly, skeletons lack flesh, right? So what's there is just this skeletal structure, which is rather specific. It's not just some very unspecified structure. But it lacks flesh, meat. Therefore, in no way they can be said to represent full-blown knowledge of their domain. Instead, they are potential structures, one that can contribute to the epigenesis, or development, of their flesh as they interact with the kind of environments that have the potential to nourish such development. So the conclusion is that I think that Locke is not successful in this argument, but I think, in 2004, I published an article in Philosophy and Phenomenological Research where I was super critical of Locke's arguments and I thought they were pointless. But now I'm coming to I think that they do not work, but I think that Locke raised some really fundamental questions about the nature of the innateness claim that still need to be systematically addressed. And so Locke's criticisms stem from and target a real ambivalence in the nativist camp between cognitive and non-cognitive characterizations of innateness. This is true not only of 17th century nativists like Descartes and Leibniz, but also current defenders of nativism. So I think that the only way to address this issue is so some people dismiss it as not important, some people are ambivalent, but I think I think that the question is attentive. We need to give it an answer. But I think the only way of finding this answer is just to work for philosophers side by side with cognitive psychologists and neuroscientists, and to see why is this hypothesis spelled out in different ways. It may be as simple as that we're working on different conceptions of concepts. It's a tricky part of the argument, but Plato had an answer to that, right? So, according to Plato, the argument is that so the conclusion is that you must have learned them before, because even if you don't remember, right? Because there is no way that you could have learned this concept from experience. He gives this argument in the Phaedo, and he says, think of the notion of equality, right? How do you develop the idea of something being the same, equal? Say, well, people would say, well, I observe two pieces of paper, two sticks. The example is two sticks. I see two sticks. They seem to be equal. But Plato says, and this is an argument that you find also in Descartes, the concept of equality is kind of perfect, but you never find two perfectly equal things in the world. And so, there is no way that you could have had this notion of perfect equality from experience, right? From the senses. And that's why, since you have it, you must have learned it before, even if you don't remember. See what I mean? That's why you said, because of my memory. But you're right. I mean, look, this is also just to continue on your line of criticism. I may have ideas of memory that I don't know they're memories, right? Right? Because, you can imagine situations where you met somebody 10 years ago, or, forgot this person completely for whatever reason. And then you meet him or her again, right? At a party. Say, oh, yeah, hi, nice to meet you. And what you're having is well, in a sense, there's a memory, but you don't, or it could be, the idea you have of him or her, could it be actually a memory? No, wait. Wait. Well, if you don't remember, it's a new idea. But you had that idea before. Or you can imagine cases where, this is a better example. You can imagine cases where this is actually Leibniz's example. You learned a poem. You read a poem 10 years ago, 5 years ago, right? Then you're a poet, and you forgot about this poem. And it's actually tricky, right? This is the question for you. Leibniz says, well, then one day you write the same poem, and you think it's yours, but in fact, you're just kind of spitting it out from memory.
Yeah.
Right, so.
I think we have 2 points about this one. That's one. The first one is about Plato's cave metaphor.
Yeah.
Yeah, because according to his theory, we couldn't get the idea from memory, because we have learned some ideas before we were.
Right.
Before we were born.
Yeah.
So actually, everything is returned again and again. So actually we couldn't say, oh, okay, I learned the new ideas after my birth.
Right.
So that's the first point. So that's the cave metaphor. And the second point is about his concept of idea.
Yeah.
Because that means, I think that means the verb formulation or verb formulation of concept. So actually he just gave us some conception of form.
Right.
Rather than
that's the real issue.
Some contents of ideas.
Yeah, I think they're both interesting points. I mean, the first is one, you're right. So he wants to say that all knowledge is recollection because of the argument we said, but would he be saying also that, I mean, it must count as recollection even if we actually don't remember, right? Mm-hmm. Because he does believe that he believes in the pre-existence and immortality of the soul, Plato, right? Mm-hmm. So he believes essentially that when the soul gets connected to the body, it forgets everything. Yeah. So he's just committed to the view that all knowledge is a recollection, at least to the extent that all knowledge is innate, so it's predetermined. But the other point, which is crucial, that this argument, Plato's argument, works if and only if you buy into the theory of the forms. Because who's to say that we have this perfect idea of equality, right? Right? An abstract idea. So it's like a perfect idea. So Descartes makes this example about the triangle. He says, because Gassendi, who is an empiricist, Pierre Gassendi, contemporary of Descartes, had said, look, we don't have innate ideas of triangles. We learn them. We just observe different shapes, and we abstract, the general features, and we leave out the particular features. And Descartes says, well, but just think about it. He makes actually two claims. One is that we have this idea of the perfect triangle, but there's no perfect triangle in experience. So how do we get that idea from? And one can say, well, do we really have the idea? Do we really have a perfect, meaning abstract? Like, just think of the pure triangle in the sense of abstract, in the sense of having nothing particular related to it, right? Berkeley, of course, said, well, I can't have that view, right? It's just, what does it mean to have that general abstract? But that's one of Descartes' claims. The other one is that, and this is, I think, a better point, is that Descartes is saying, well, look, this is very Kantian. He says, well, we must have an understanding of what a triangle is. Otherwise, you wouldn't even be able to identify different shapes as triangles as opposed to, rectangles or something. So it's more like a precondition of, so having the concept is a precondition for experiencing things in the world as such, which I think is a better way of putting it.
So could we say that negativism is the revival of Plato ideas?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is still. I know. Well, it's not exactly in the same way. No. I don't think anybody would say that in order to be a nativist, you have to be committed to the pre-existence of the mind. Nobody believes that there is a mind which is distinct from the body, except for Mason.
But the debate between Locke and Descartes push forward the questions about where the idea comes from.
Yes. So that's the idea. That's the thing. I mean, why do we know what we know? Where do they come from? Are they all learned from experience, or do we actually come equipped to the world with some knowledge, which may not be explicit. And of course, this also has, you know, Rochelle Gelman actually just wrote with other linguists, like a book for, you know, elementary schools. So depending on what you think, depending on what you think the mind is equipped with, there may be different methodologies, educational, pedagogical methodology that you can use. So this has also far-reaching, practical, pedagogical implications. So nobody, obviously, not even Plato, believed that you can just come to the world and you know everything. And look, it's perfectly, people just, you know, when they complain about nativism, they say, well, then if something is innate, that everybody should know it. No. I mean, if you haven't, so there may be some critical periods that if they pass, then you can never have developed the knowledge of that specific domain. Or it may be that, you know, some people are not interested in cultivating a particular, or maybe there's some people may have impairments in the brain that impedes them from developing certain knowledge. I mean, the fact that you don't exhibit the knowledge is, at least it's not sufficient evidence against the nativist hypothesis, I don't think.